The Christmas nativity scene in Třebechovice pod Orebem has filled people with wonder for decades and will continue to do so long into the future. That's because time plays no role in this nativity scene. And that is exactly how Josef Probošt, the designer, imagined it. No one else will ever have a Christmas nativity scene like this, because the Třebechovice Bethlehem is quite unique. Let us take you back to the days when this remarkable piece of Czech national cultural heritage was created, the only piece that was not commissioned, which means it was produced without any financial support. Who was able to design and construct a Christmas nativity scene composed of over 2,000 carved pieces over 100 years ago? Who created this wooden theatre weighing over 1 ton with its numerous ramparts, palaces, churches, mill, hermitage, and 400 intricate figures of people and animals on an area measuring 7 by 2 meters? We can credit the work to 3 Josefs, Probošt, Kapucián, and Frimmel. The first 2 can be found in the nativity scene itself in the form of figures carved to resemble them. The initiator of the mechanical Christmas nativity scene was Josef Probošt. He was a farmer and carpenter, and it's thought that he wanted to console his wife after the death of their 7-month-old son, so he carved her a crib for Christmas. He came up with a unique idea, and she got a beautiful present, an entire Christmas nativity scene. He worked on it for 40 years. He gave up working on the farm, and all the work had to be done by his wife and daughter, Anna.
No, pomáhala jsem mu.
A jak jste mu pomáhala?
No, když potřeboval, tak jsem mu s ním točila.
Aha.
Making the Christmas nativity scene became Probošt's lifelong passion. He worked on it from 1885 right up to his death in 1926, at the age of 76. Josef Kapucián was an extraordinarily talented woodcarver whose life sounds like the plot of a Hollywood blockbuster. All 3 of his children and both of his wives died, and he ended up lonely and deaf in a poorhouse, where he died in 1908. An important co-creator of the nativity scene, who actually put it in motion, was a mill carpenter named Josef Frimmel. Mill carpenters specialized in the construction of wooden machinery and equipment, in particular mills and hydraulic drop hammers. Originally, Josef Probošt's nativity scene was L-shaped, but he found it was impractical and complicated to assemble when traveling to exhibitions. So, in the early 20th century, he rebuilt it as a linear scene. Transporting the nativity scene was both technically difficult and costly. We know this from Probošt's request for a partial exemption from a fee for exhibiting the scene at the Choceň exhibition in 1914. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to exhibit my work at all. If only those tireless wooden figures could talk and share some of their travel experiences, about how they travelled with the nativity scene in Bohemia, Moravia and Slovakia, as well as to London and the Dutch model city of Madrodam. They would certainly boast that the mechanical wonder from Třebechovice was one of the most visited exhibits at the Expo 67 exhibition in Montreal. Travelling apart, much wear and tear was also caused when the nativity scene had to be hidden away during World War II. For a while, it was even concealed in a brewery icebox. No wonder it needed occasional treatment. Restoration work carried out between 2012 and 2014 included renovating 4 drive belts and repairing the cuckoo clock mechanism, windmill, and the Ascension of Jesus Christ scene. But that was not enough. Sadly, the nativity scene continued to deteriorate until someone had the idea to raise funds for a comprehensive renovation. As Sylvia Dušková, the project manager, recalls, the Třebechovice Museum applied for funding under the long-anticipated Norway Grants scheme. The Atelieri Barta company won the tender, and in mid-June 2015, after a year of planning and preparation, the work, which required a lot of skill, patience and money, got underway.
Královéhradecký kraj přispěl částkou 670 000, město Třebechovice 910 000 a právě tou největší částkou přispěly norské fondy, a to 5 700 000.
The name Klaus Brandl is closely associated with this support, specifically with the EEA and Norway grants. He's the only wood restoration expert in Liechtenstein, where they say that Christmas nativity scenes should be part of every respectable household. And in our case, Klaus Brandl became the expert advisor for the restoration of the figures. The scenery and figures made a great impression on me as a restoration expert. The wood carving technique and facial expressions are first class. I have great admiration for what was created more than 100 years ago using very simple tools. So, there was the will and there was the funding. But where do you start with the complete renovation of a piece of national heritage that has not been renovated so extensively for the past 100 years?
Takže jsme museli vytvořit systém značení a záznamu tak, aby i v případě, že se dostaneme až do hloubky, aby to pořád fungovalo.
Experts from Atelieri Barta had helped with the partial renovation of the Christmas nativity scene in 2012, so they knew what to expect. Nonetheless, there were a lot of questions and problems, and new ones kept appearing. For instance, what model should be used to make a copy of an elephant figure that had been lost after the nativity scene was transported back from the Montreal exhibition? Actually, it's quite likely the figure was stolen, but that's not important today. A new elephant was put in the scene, but it was not identical to the original one.
To, co držím v ruce, je jeho kopie. Tu vyrobil sochař František Bartoš během velké rekonstrukce po návratu z výstavy v Montrealu. Bylo proto nutné tohoto slona vyměnit. Neodpovídal stylem ani charakterem a během tohoto generálního restaurování jsme se rozhodli vrátit toho původního. Bylo proto nutné skutečně dohledat historické podklady a záznamy. A pro tyto účely se nám podařilo získat dokument České televize z roku 65, kde na 2 vteřiny se objeví ten původní slon. A tyto 2 vteřiny nám musely postačit k výrobě kopie toho původního slona.
Once a new elephant figure made of pear wood had been inserted, the entire world of carved figures once again resembled the original version by Probošt. Pear wood also played a key role in the masterly carving work by Kapucian. He carved the whole descent from the cross scene from a single piece of pear wood. This is probably the most valuable single carving in the whole scene. It's located in a discreet place just under the ceiling, but it would be a pity to overlook it. As you carefully observe the carved parts of the nativity scene, notice the 5 trees that are cunningly interlinked to create the illusion of a complete treetop. And apart from figures telling the biblical story, you can also see Probošt's neighbours at work. The restoration carvers worked as wood surgeons. Here they attached a broken arm, there another part of a figure or scenery. It would be only a slight exaggeration to say that the figures that were moved along the tracks by chain belts were endangered species. This was because of the poor state of repair of the beechwood chains, as well as the driving and drive wheels they connected.
V Betlému je 21 pohyblivých pásů. Musely být všechny vyměněny. Celkem bylo vyměněno 738 článků těch řetězů a kdybychom spočítali, kolik to bylo metrů, tak je to zhruba 62,7 metru dřevěného řetězu, který se musel znovu nainstalovat na Betlém.
Sometimes the restorers also had to play the role of detectives. They managed to discover the original formula used back in the 18th century to lubricate wooden mechanical parts in mills. It's proved ideal for the wooden nativity scene in Třebechovice too. And what was that magical ointment? Nothing but hot beef tallow.
hovězí lůj se vlastně nanáší v horké podobě na ty kluzné plochy a následně je jemně setřen a následně opět, to je velmi důležité, je potřeba ten povrch zahřát, aby došlo k otevření vlastně buněk dřeva, je nasátí toho hovězího loje a ten lůj je potom během toho pohybu samovolně uvolňován a mechanika je tak mazána.
Another intervention, invisible to the audience but absolutely crucial for the movement of the figures, was the replacing of pull wires. The old ones, which had been repaired in the past, were cut out and new ones were attached with silver soldering. And which figure, or rather which segment of the scene, posed the biggest challenge?
Synchronizace pohybu celé kapely byl úkol, se kterým se náš pasíř skutečně, dá se říct nadsázkou, dobře popasoval.
Having inspected the figures in detail, the restorers found to their surprise that some of the static ones were originally intended to be movable. For instance, the farm woman should have churned the butter with both hands, but she does it with one hand only. Christ's blessing should also have been far more spectacular.
Skutečně celá figura má vzadu připravený prostor, protáhla, ruka má kloubní jamku, je kompletně připravená pro pohyb, ale ten pohyb již realizován nebyl.
If not the eighth wonder of the world, the machinery of Mr. Probošt's work can be considered the first wonder of nativity scenes. Not only because everything's made of wood, wheels, chains, cogwheels. Remarkably, not a single movement is tied to another one. Every component has its own gears and trains. Over the last 130 years, the gearing has not been treated to a single comprehensive overhaul. The last few years of heavy operation, however, caused such grave damage to the core machinery that a complete restoration was essential.
Toto celé kolo se už nedalo použít a proto jsme museli přistoupit k celkové výměně. To znamená, že jsme udělali přesnou kopii, včetně počtu zubů, sklonu zubů, tak, aby nám to kolo mohlo dalších desetiletí sloužit.
You cannot but gaze in admiration at the intricacy of the work. The transmission stress had to be reduced. The iron spindles in the shafts had to be replaced. And new casings had to be produced for the spindles. Replacing 167 spindles, this represents an astounding 425 hours of work. Now, engineering and technology enthusiasts should pay special attention. Josef Probošt needed no calculations or drawings for his masterpiece. He did it all in his head. Nowadays, we need our heads for millions of other things, and that's why we have 3D. The fully functional virtual model of the nativity scene machinery contains all the gears, driving wheels, shafts, cogwheels, etc.
Výstupem toho všeho je 3D zpracování celého betléma všech převodů a následně výkresová dokumentace všech pohyblivých částí. V průběhu dokumentace jsem narazil i na několik zajímavostí. Jednou z nich je například ozubené kolo, které má jak přímé ozubení, tak šikmé, což je docela dobrá proboštová vychytávka. Například pohyb betlémské hvězdy zprostředkovává 6 řemenic, 11 řídelí a 12 ozubených kol. Na to pak navazují ještě další 2 kola s článkovým řetězem, na kterém je ta betlémská hvězda přidělaná.
Byli jsme překvapeni, jak je to dokonalý. Ta mechanika je úžasná, je velice nádherná. Já osobně si myslím, že je krásnější než ten celý betlém. Ten frame to dělá s nadhledem a s genialitou sobě vlastní. Ten betlém by se měl vystavovat z druhé strany, ale to je věc názoru. No.
There was no such thing as a minor task in the restoration of such a sophisticated device as Probošt's nativity scene in Třebechovice. For instance, what should it be cleaned with? After many experiments, a unique mixture of denatured alcohol, pharmaceutical hexane, ammoniac and pH-neutral soap was concocted. The search for the ideal surface finish was just as exacting. Once the colour of the replaced parts was retouched, everything received a shellac finish. Shellac is a natural resin derived from the secretions of lac insects. And that's not all. After drying, it was finished with beeswax, to which natural carnauba wax had been added. The restorers also spent a great deal of energy searching for the right method for turning new mirrors into mirrors with a 100-year patina to replace the damaged ones, and glaze 128 miniature windows. So what was the biggest challenge for these experienced restorers?
Jak vytvořit to zalomení? To znamená tu iluzi toho ručního skla. Takže všechny zrcadla dneska na Betlému jsou ošetřena technikou rybího klihu, který jediný má skutečně ty výjimečné vlastnosti, že drží na skle a zároveň vytváří tu dokonalou iluzi toho ručního skla v tom malém provedení.
Sometimes discoveries are made in quite unexpected places.
Při samotném restaurování byl objeven rozvrh dcery Josefa Probošta, kterým si podkládal jednu ze svých konzolí, takže jsme mohli zjistit, co v dané době měla za rozvrh, které předměty se v dané době učily.
Up till 1934, the scene was driven by a crank handle, and surprisingly enough, even a child could manage it. But then came the age of motors. At one point, the scene was even fitted with a washing machine motor. But now the washing cycle is over. The magical wooden world can be easily set in motion once again with just one hand. While we admire the craftsmanship of the three Josephs, they would undoubtedly appreciate the modern smart drive of their masterpiece. Pavel Turyanica of the Regional Innovation Center for Electrical Engineering at the University of West Bohemia in Pilsen extols the smooth new smart drive, which is far easier on the scene than the abrupt starts and stops of the past. Laser sensors monitor any risks of slowdown or jamming in the machinery. When such a risk is identified, the drive is switched to an immediate but gentle stop. Fast and gentle, that's the ideal combination not only in relation to sensors, but to everyone who took part in the comprehensive restoration project. They all worked with the awareness that it's not just a nativity scene, but much more.
Proboštův Betlém je unikátní nejenom svojí dřevěnou mechanikou, ale také svým myšlenkovým záběrem. Byl vystaven formou oltáře. Josef Probošt do něj vložil vše, celý svůj život, svoje radosti i svoje smutky.
And if we keep quiet now and don't say a word, we can hear what has not been heard for a long, long time. As if all this beauty and ingenuity were not enough, a shepherd comes out at regular intervals leading his flock. A bell chimes, and then another one. Since May 2016, it's been just like it was 100 years ago, as if the figures had not grown a single day older. How was it possible to bring this globally unique masterpiece, comparable to the Czech crown jewels or the Venus of Dolní Věstonice, back to life? It took restoration expert Tomáš Barta and his 13-member team exactly the same amount of time as is needed for a new human life to develop. 9 months that they dedicated to painstaking work, consultation with experts, searching for and improving old procedures. Over 18,500 hours expended to restore this national treasure to its former glory. And no comeback is complete without a good luck wish and the Archbishop's blessing. All the more so when it's the most famous nativity scene in the world, the pride of the museum in Třebechovice pod Orebem and the whole Czech Republic.
Věřím, že třebechovičtí jsou pyšní na tak velkolepé dílo, které vytvořili jejich rodáci. A jsem ráda, že se podařilo zrestaurovat Betlém a může tak pokračovat Proboštův odkaz dál. A věřím, že ti nejmenší, kteří dnes stojí před Proboštovým Betlémem, zde budou stát se svými dětmi, neboť zhlédnutí Betlému je zážitek na celý život.